Happy Tuesday, everybody. In today's episode, we're going to discuss the crime scene in the Delphi murders. Stay tuned. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Rebecca, your host and hostess with the mostest. I recap live trials so you have something to listen to while you're crafting. I am a former attorney and a former nurse. I am now retired, happily retired. So we're talking about day 3 of testimony in the case against Richard Allen. He is on trial for the first-degree murder of Abby and Libby. Libby German, Abby Williams. Now, this occurred back in 2017. He was not arrested for 5 years. So 7 years ago, this occurred. And this judge is making it so difficult for my podcast friends out there. Oh my God. They're only allowing 24 people in the courtroom at a time. So I go back last night to watch Lawyer Lee and Andrea Burkhart, and they are exhausted. I even put on Lauren in Due Crime for a little while. They're exhausted. They are spending the entire night in sleeping bags so they can get a place in the courtroom. Lawyer Lee didn't get into the morning session yesterday, so this is one of the reasons I had to watch a different channel to figure out what went on in this case. She got notes from other people, but that's it. There is apparently an area in the courtroom where they could add additional chairs and did add additional chairs for prior hearings, but for this trial, no additional seating. And no, like other trials, you'll get like another room for the media, and not here. Nothing. And I do know that, like Andrea Burkhart, I told you she's an appellate attorney. She filed a motion in this case to allow the public to view the evidence and to have a recording at the end of the day, so they don't have to, sit camped out because this is ridiculous. Do like they did in the Lori case, Lori Vallow. Just give us a recording at the end of the day. Don't have these poor people in sleeping bags outside the courthouse. It's terrible. Anyway, so here's what happened. First witness was Darren Giancola. He was working, he's a detective now. At the time, he was a patrol officer on the night shift. He had that night off, but he volunteered. He went in, and he got there after it was already dark. He had heard about this on social media and then went ahead and responded out there and assisted with the search. He said they were using flashlights, and it was still very difficult to see. This is a very dense forest surrounding this Monon High Bridge. It is quite dense, and it's not surprising that you would not be able to see at night. So they searched till around 2 a.m. and then they decided to come back the next day. He came back the next day. One of the things that he did was he got permission from the landowners surrounding there to enter their property, because a lot of the places they were searching were private property. So he got their permission. So one of the things he did was ask about trail cameras, and he located somebody said, "Hey, I got some trail camera footage. You want to come see it?" So he was on his way to obtain the trail cameras footage when he was called by the chief of police to go to the cemetery because they had found the bodies. Now, he walked down to the crime scene. He said it was very, very steep. An older person probably would have difficulty. I wouldn't be able to do it. I can tell you that right now. Like, you have to climb down with all fours to get to where they are at. And my understanding is it's while it does slope down, it kind of slopes down. It doesn't just go like this. It's, it's sort of uneven ground. And the girls were found in sort of the dip of one of those hills on the side of this road or creek, side of the creek. So they were about 40 to 50 yards. Like you go to the end of the cemetery, they were about 40 yards into the woods there. So once he actually walked all the way down to the creek. Once he got to the creek, he could see people on the other side. He did see the t-shirt and the sneaker in the water. He said they were hollering back and forth across the creek. From his vantage point, he could see a white object. Now, he didn't know what it was, but when he got there to where the white object was, it was where the bodies were. So he described that they were, let me see if I can tell you from listening to all the evidence how they were. They were sort of in a V, the bodies, Abby and Libby. So where their feet were not so far apart, maybe 4 to 5 feet apart, the girls, but like a V. And in the center of this V was where they found the bullet shell. This was not a casing, it was the whole bullet. I thought it was just a casing. It's casing was unspent. In other words, I think that's how you say it. Abby or Libby was nude and Abby was clothed. Libby had her eyes and mouth were open and she was covered in blood. Now, all of this is being shown to the jury. The clothing that was on Abby was wet. Both of their throats had been slit. So there was a substantial amount of blood at the scene. And they were obviously deceased. So no one attempted to do CPR on these girls. They were clearly not alive anymore. So he started taking names of people coming into the area and guarded the scene until the troopers arrived. So one of the things he did help do was put out the crime scene tape. You got to get out the crime scene tape. And they cordoned off about a football field's worth of real estate around this crime scene. And then what they did was, as they were searching for evidence. As they're searching for evidence, they had like a rope that they would put out. Once one area had been searched, so people knew where they could walk. If you followed the rope, you knew you could walk there. So he never did go get the trail cam footage. Nobody ever went and got it that I know of. No trail cam. I would love to know what was on that trail cam footage. I really would. So he did talk about the fact that he had a cell phone on him and it was working at the site. I think his carrier was, he can't remember whether he was using his duty phone or his personal phone, but he said his personal phone is an AT&T phone. So whichever one it was, he was getting coverage out there. Because we know that Abby's phone, or Libby's phone, Abby didn't have a phone. Libby's phone shut itself off about 5:30 that afternoon and it wakes back up at 4:30 a.m. and downloads 15 messages, texts and messages and stuff. So who was handling that phone at 4:30 a.m.? He was also asked about what weapon he carries. Every witness is asked this because they're trying to establish that the bullet that was there didn't fall out of someone else's pocket or gun or however it got down there. It didn't come from anyone else. He says, I have a Glock, not my bullet. So I did talk about the area not being flat, the different elevations. One of the jury questions for him was, what he said was when he responded that night, he was checking one of the first things he did was start to check the girls' electronics. So the jury asked him, what electronics? And he said, well, there was an iPad or a tablet that he was checking, but it was locked. He couldn't get into it, couldn't access it. So the next person on the stand was Sergeant Jason Page. He was a crime scene investigator. Now there's officers that are sworn officers that are doing crime scene investigation. But then there's also going to be some texts that come out. We haven't heard from the text yet, but this was one of 3 crime scene investigators that came out to assist each other. He arrived about 1:30 p.m. He parked at the cemetery. He talked some more about the scene. Now, Abby was wearing a shirt and a pair of pants that were not hers. They didn't fit it right. This was clearly not hers. It was probably Abby's. And she had on one shoe, and it looked like it was slipping off her foot. Yeah. The other shoe, now there was a shoe found down by the creek, Nikes. So they did find this clothing at the creek before almost simultaneous to finding the bodies, just before they found the bodies. They see these clothing in the creek, and the clothing included tie-dye shirts, some kind of outerwear jacket, another pair of pants, some socks, some shoes. It was all of this in the creek. Probably what Abby had worn, but now she's got Libby's clothes on at the crime scene. Very interesting. So Libby was, this is the way that Andrea described it. Libby was crammed near a tree with her feet at the trunk of the tree. Or am I saying that right? Okay, she said it was a very large trunk. Her head was towards the trunk of the tree. And her left hand was sort of up in the air. And there was a large tree on the side of her body. Then she talked about the blood stain splat. We're going to hear from a blood splatter expert, thank God. But she was talking about her observations of the blood stains on Libby. And the blood on the face looked like, instead of, if you're positioned like I am and you're bleeding, the blood's going down. They were both on their backs, so it might even been going down. This blood was going this way. So was she hanging upside down at some point? And then on her leg there was a little cut, and it looked like the blood had gone up and then over, like linear, which, that's weird. It should have just gone down. So curious to see what the blood splatter expert says about the blood on Abby or on Libby. I keep getting these two girls mixed up. Bless their hearts. That was on her right thigh, and it was drops of blood that were going across her leg. So, and this, what does all this tell us? These bodies were moved. Somehow they got to the south. They were on the south side of that creek, and they went across to the north side. I don't know if they were drug across, which begs the question, how does one person who is 5'4", maybe 5'5", this little guy, get these two, I don't know if they were alive or dead when he's dragging them across this creek, but either way, that's two bodies. It's, and no one's seeing this? You're dragging two bodies across the creek, or you're forcing them. I don't know. I don't know how it happened. The clothes are in the creek. They get across the creek. They're dead. The blood splatter. I don't know what went on here. Honestly, I don't know what went on here. Also, each girl had some branches. One had 2, one had 3 branches. And these weren't branches to try to disguise the body. You know how you would put leaves over it and branches and you're trying to hide the body. These were strategically, you could tell that someone placed these branches on them. Did it spell out a ruin, or we don't know. We don't know. Yeah. So But Abby's body, compared to Libby, who was covered in blood, Abby's body's clean. So was she washed at some point? So she had her hands kind of tucked into her sweatshirt. She had a sweatshirt on, and her hands were like this inside the sweatshirt, kind of like a fighting stance. One leg was over the other. I told you she was wearing one shoe. She had a little bit of blood on her face with a wound on the left side of her neck. There was blood on the tree, but one of the trees around there, but it was on the opposite side of where the girls were. Which also, how did that blood get there? Did somebody touch that tree after they touched the girls? We don't know. So, all in all, not as much blood as you would expect at a crime scene. If 2 throats are cut and each person has several liters of blood in their body, they're going to exsanguinate on the scene of where they're killed. It didn't look like that. Now, I don't know how much blood the ground will absorb in a few hours, but yeah. Now, the interesting thing about these tree branches that were placed on the bodies is that they weren't collected for evidence, tossed aside. At some point, they were asked to go back and get them, and they did. But I don't know if any testing was done on them. Doesn't appear to have been any testing done on these branches. The people that threw them off to the side thought, oh, there's no evidentiary value in a tree branch, and they just threw it off to the side. Yeah, so they were sent back later to retrieve the sticks. Apparently, at that point in time, the water level in the creek would have been really, really high. And I made a note that the blood splatter expert was not hired until this year. So the next person to take a stand was he's another crime scene investigator. He also this guy was a helicopter pilot. He took helicopter aerial photos of the scene, which we did not see any of those. I don't know if they showed them and the podcasters just didn't comment on it. But there was some other items that he talks about finding at the entrance to the trail, or the Monon High Bridge Trail. They found a bra, a pink colored sock, a shirt, an energy drink can, a Jimmy John's drink cup with a straw, and some Camel cigarette butts. I didn't get whether they collected those or they just inventoried them, or I assume they collected them, but it doesn't seem like they were related to this case. The other thing that someone said about this bullet, because it was kind of lodged into the ground, the way that they found this bullet was they brought in a blue light, and you have to put these goggles on, and the blue light will illuminate blood. Well, this witness, he didn't wear the goggles, but when the blue light was on, he kept seeing something glimmering on the ground, and that was how they found the bullet. So he had to remove some leaves and then kind of dig it out of the ground, but never photographed it. Yeah. So then the jury starts asking questions that have to do with chain of custody, because they don't know anything about chain of custody. So after they asked this question, then the prosecution got very careful about bringing into evidence other pieces. Every time they'd bring something else into evidence to show the jury, they would talk about how it went through the chain of command, or the chain of command? No, not chain of command. You know what I mean. Yes. So that they understood that, this stuff is not just tossed into the back seat and then, thrown into a locker somewhere. There's a lot more that goes into it. Okay. So that was yesterday at the Delphi murder case. I hope those women get in today. I really do. Sleeping in a sleeping bag is horrific, and they're not getting any sleep. My God. Anyway, so that is that case. I will keep following it for you. I'm going to end this video now. We're going to go over to the Sarah Boone case next. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video. Take care. Bye.